Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. There's quite a few of us here, and two of us are legal professionals. And that must be because, of course, we've got Bruce here, and now we must surround ourselves with legal professionals from anywhere but New Zealand, which, of course, might not help in the long run. Hello, LinkedIn. If this has worked again, I don't really know how that works. We've got quite a few things to talk about tonight. Let us start with an interesting one. I saw a tweet earlier from Ash, and it was about Microdrone 4, I think it is, isn't it? Is it Microdrone 4? And what's going on with that? So, Ash, I then contacted Richard, who is a lawyer in the UK, a barrister. Is lawyer the right term, or do I say barrister, Richard? What do I say?
I prefer barrister.
Barrister. Okay. Sorry. Sorry.
I think it's more American.
Sorry, you are.
Take him down.
Take it down, John. Oh, Jonathan's just pure hiss on that. All right. I contacted Richard because Richard knows about this stuff, and some things were said. In fact, let's try and mute Jonathan. Jonathan, I'm going to mute you. There we are. He's got to unmute himself now. Things were said on Twitter that didn't strike me as kosher. Anyway, I'll let you and Ash ask Richard. Carry on. I'll try and get rid of Jonathan.
Yeah. So basically, we've got a UK crowdfund project, a UK-based company. Their head office is in London. They're called Extreme Toys. And unfortunately, these toys are anything but extreme. Their crowdfunder, which started 15, 16 months ago, still hasn't delivered. When they started the crowdfund campaign, they promised a drone that was ready to distribute to backers. It was ready and brilliant and stabilized gimbal and 150 grams and ready to go. And 15 months later, it's still not shipped to a single backer. The specifications of the drone have changed radically, so it offered a higher megapixel camera than it actually is now being produced with. It's heavier than it was originally committed to be. It's bigger. Its flight time is reduced down to a mere 10 minutes. Essentially, it's a pretty naff product compared to what was offered, which is sadly the story of crowdfund these days. And as you can understand, global backers are now frustrated because they are in COVID times when, you know, in the Western society, we are given a lot of financial buffer, I guess it's fair to say. But in other countries where people have invested their hard-earned money, they're now in financial distress and they want their money back. A couple of $100 doesn't sound a lot to many, but to some it's a big investment. And they're pleading with the CEO of this company for a refund because they still haven't delivered. The product is still in prototype. In fact, they claim that the tooling is still not finalized now, which has been revealed, which means that it's not a production model, effectively. According to Indiegogo, if it's not in production, they're entitled to a refund. And the CEO, Vernon Kurzweil, is refusing to give refunds. And so the backers are now taking the CEO and the company to court. Now, because it's a UK-based company, the backers are global and they're feeling like their hands are tied. But some of them have been using the UK's legal system and the UK's local court system to raise a small claims dispute. And one of the guys, Mario today, I don't actually know where he's located, but he raised a dispute with Vernon via the UK small claims court system. And Vernon replied via email threatening this guy to report him to the UK's legal system because he's not based in the UK. And according to Vernon, you're not allowed to raise a UK legal claim if you're not living in the UK, which is effectively bullying. You know, Vernon's claiming that he will report this guy to the UK's legal system and he'll be in a lot of trouble if he doesn't try and resolve this quietly with Vernon, which effectively I think is blackmail, quite bluntly. The UK court system responded to Mario today to say that he is perfectly entitled to actually make a claim against the UK company, even if he's not living in the UK. as long as he provides a UK address, somebody who can pass any correspondence back to him in his home country, wherever that might be in the world, contrary to the claims of the CEO of the company, Extreme Toys. So it's a nice result for Mario. It means that he actually does have protection of the UK's legal system, and he has responded to Vernon, the CEO, to say, I will pursue this claim, whether you like it or not. And Vernon replied to him earlier today, I don't know if this has been made public yet, to say, bad decision, good luck. From the CEO of a company, that kind of unprofessional response. So from a UK legal perspective, Richard, it's great to have you here. Is this guy who's not based in the UK fully entitled to the protection of the UK's legal system in this scenario?
It's a really good question, and I think, there are probably going to be quite a few people, as you've said, that are going to be facing this kind of problem, especially when you now get onto an international crowdfunding program. You're always going to have to go back to when I had a quick look at Indiegogo's terms today. Once you get past the refund hurdles that they have within their terms and conditions, you're going to go back to the jurisdiction of the company that's asking for the money for crowdfunding. And in this case, it's a UK entity. Now, what we're talking about here is service and jurisdiction. Now, as a barrister, I have to be very careful because I can't be giving advice because I've not taken formal instructions and nobody here or abroad is my client. But what I will do is phrase it in the context of what I would do if I was in those shoes. So if it was me and I was in the position of Mario, what I'd be looking to do is exactly that. I would be looking at finding a person who has a residence in the UK that can service the court documents. And the whole reason why you have to have an address in the UK is so that you get access to any claim or defence that's served against you, so that you have a reasonable chance of responding, so that you can make your case, whatever side of the fence you sit on. And that's the reason why primarily you need a UK address. It gives the court system certainty that that person who is now encompassed in the UK jurisdiction, would it be in effect notified that there's a claim in process and that they can respond accordingly to it. So what I would be doing potentially is a couple of different things. If I was in these shoes, I would either be seeking somebody that can assist me, and we have a principle in England called a Mackenzie friend. So potentially you could use a Mackenzie friend who is resident in the UK. You could approach somebody like me, who's a direct access barrister, and say, Richard, could you accept service on my behalf like any lawyer would do, whether it's a solicitor or barrister? So you can get, much like we have many disputes in the UK from people in foreign jurisdictions, they'll appoint a lawyer to act on their behalf in the jurisdiction because they can accept advice or accept instructions on their behalf or documents on their behalf, and then communicate directly with the client. So the client was always going to get that information. And what he can also do in the event that he wasn't happy or there was some uncertainty around the address for service because he's living abroad, is he can write to all parties, including the court, and say, I've changed my address, and notify everybody that he's changed his address, and the claim continues. So it doesn't mean that the claim's going to get thrown out, potentially. If I was in his shoes, I'd be potentially looking at another option and saying, I'm now going to notify all the parties that I'm not living abroad, or I'm living abroad, sorry, but I've got somebody who's willing to accept service of documents on my behalf, and they're a resident in the UK.
So that ties into what he's actually done. So his case that he's raised via the UK legal system, he's done so via, and he's researched this really well, because if you live in the UK, it's hard enough to find legal information and guidance. But if you live outside of the UK, it's even harder. But he's really looked into this pretty cleverly, I would say, because he's already aware that he needs to have provided a UK address of a friend or a contact. And that's who he's actually raised the case with. So he's provided a UK resident address of a friend who can pass any correspondence to him. On that basis, I guess he doesn't need to do anything more besides the point that the response from the UK legal system today, or the local court, which is that if this goes to actual court, he may have to actually travel and appear, which incurs a cost for him. So I guess the next question really is, if that's the case, does Mario have a case that he can provide the expense of that as part of the compensation in the outcome for this to Vernon, the CEO of this company?
So what I would do if I was in those shoes, I would certainly be looking at how I can recompense myself. But in a small claims court, I'm aware that costs and expenses are capped because it's a small claim. And it's about providing access to justice to everybody. And that's why costs are capped in that sense. And the fund limits are set in place for that very reason. But what I would contemplate doing potentially is writing to the court and asking them if they would accept that person to represent me on my behalf because I've given them my instructions. Or I'd ask the court, what we have seen during this pandemic are more virtual hearings.
Right.
And ask the court if I could attend by telephone.
That sounds perfect for him. Yeah.
So I would, if I was living in Spain or somewhere like that, and I put a small claims court in, I would certainly be asking the court to say, look, these are my personal circumstances. Due to the pandemic, for example, it is not appropriate for me to travel right now, especially if you're a vulnerable person or something like that, potentially. I think it would be more appropriate for me to attend the court hearings by telephone, please.
He's based in Italy, it looks like, actually. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, so I'd certainly be looking at doing that. I mean, the other aspect to it is if I was living in Spain, I could also appoint a European lawyer to act on my behalf, potentially. And a European lawyer could accept service of those documents and potentially attend those court hearings, which would be very convenient if that European lawyer lived in the UK, for example. So it's not just a case of restricting it to just, UK lawyers. It could be a European lawyer also, a legal representative. So that's what I would probably, one aspect I would consider, I think, if I was stuck in these shoes. The other aspect and I mentioned this to Gary earlier today, is if you're a UK person that's being captured by this crowdfunding, and what I didn't realize is on Indiegogo, they accept funding by credit card. Now, in the UK, we have credit card protection laws, and they're usually around defective products. So I'm not sure how this would apply, but it could be worth a shot.
We've looked into that. This is not the first dodgy crowdfunder on a drone context. Sadly, credit card companies have changed their policies now, and they consider the contribution to crowdfunding a contribution rather than a purchase. So therefore, they don't cover and they won't refund. And in addition, the other challenge is that with you investing in a campaign like Microdrone 4 15 months ago, it's too late. So most of them, I think, limit it to about 6 months before you can actually request a refund.
Right. I mean, but effectively, you are purchasing a product, aren't you? It is a contribution, but in the sense you could, you end up with a product. Classic contract law. There's offer, there's acceptance, and there's consideration. It could be worth an interesting fight with a credit card company just to see how far you could go.
It's honestly been tested already, and the challenge is that with crowdfunding, you're not purchasing, and that's something that they actually make very clear now, that you are contributing towards an idea. They call the actual product a perk. And the terminology of a perk is it's something that's nice to get as a bonus, but it's not something that it's not an expectation. So tomorrow at work, if I get a bonus, it's a perk. It's not something that contractually I'm entitled to, which is very frustrating. And that's why crowdfunding, has a lot of success in other areas. But at the moment for drones, there hasn't really been any success story. AirDog was nice, but it certainly wasn't a good deal for people that invested in it. AirDog 2 wasn't any more of a deal. Starker was a disaster. Microdrone 3 was a disaster. Microdrone 4 is currently a disaster and probably still will be if and when it ever delivers. So unfortunately, Indiegogo as well have absolutely zero accountability. They don't care. They won't respond to me or the press. And Rory Keflin-Jones of the BBC picked up this story on a video that I put out, and they didn't even respond to him. If they won't respond to Rory, they won't respond to us.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I did have a look at their terms. I saw what the triggers were for a refund, and there are 3 triggers for a refund. And if, like you say, they haven't even done the tooling yet, then they clearly aren't in a position whereby they can not refund according to their own terms and conditions, is the way that I've read it. And certainly I'd be going back to Indiegogo, like you've probably done, like many others have done, but I'd probably be a bit more pointed about it with Indiegogo, because they do have the power within their terms and conditions to remove a person who is crowdfunding from their site if indeed they haven't performed, or they fail to perform in a way that cries out some form of misrepresentation. And the reason why they do that is because Indiegogo themselves have put massive waivers in place with big red flags saying, we're not responsible for any guarantees or representations made by any party as to the fitness for purpose of their products, etc., etc., etc. But clearly here, what we have got, I think, is an element of misrepresentation, which I would probably pursue in the UK on the basis of the way that the pitch was set out and what we've got now. I'd certainly be looking at the change in specifications, and as you said, Ash, there clearly are a number of changes which scream out to me to say, hang on a minute, there's a greater issue here. And I think there are 2 aspects to attack Indiegogo on. One is their terms, and one is the morality of their platform. And I think on their terms, they have an obligation to remove somebody who is purporting to offer something that actually doesn't deliver, and they fail to deliver, especially if they're over time. And the morality issue is to say, well, hang on, why is it, Indiegogo, that you're endorsing people like this to get money from other people and host them on your platform in a way that still keeps the gate open so that they can attract more investment, when indeed it doesn't appear that they're going to be delivering? And sadly, they keep changing the specification.
Sadly, the reality is that Indiegogo need an income, and that income is a cut from a campaign like this that raises, I think it was $3 million or so. Right. And unfortunately, it's horrific that they have not stepped in. The BBC pick up a story like this, and any other company, European-based, would be acting on that. But sadly, Indiegogo, being very, very far away from Europe, over on the other side of the water in America, I believe that's where they're based, don't give a monkeys about this. They don't care about the thousands of backers that have put their hard-earned money in. They don't care about the backers pleading to the CEO that they need a refund because of the COVID scenario. They've lost their jobs and they need to be able to pay their mortgage. And this absolutely lacking of any empathy at all CEO doesn't care. And all he does is bully and troll not only people like me of the press and other YouTubers that are creating videos around this, and even Rory Keflin-Jones, who he started abusing as well on Twitter and Facebook. He just trolls instead of actually focusing on trying to deliver a product. It's now 15 months late, and can you believe he blames COVID for not delivering his product, which is now 15 months late? I don't think he realizes.
Does this mean my Lily drone isn't coming?
You know what, Bruce, you have more chance of Lily arriving than Microdrone 4 right now, honestly.
Well, what was also interesting, Ash, in Indiegogo's T's and C's is the whole GDPR element, and the fact is that they become data controllers, so they take on all the investors or contributors' personal details. Now, if somebody was to, say, for example, engineer a mass GDPR request from all the subscribers at one time into that company to the point where it would break, they would then be potentially compromising the regulations which specifically relate to timeframes for responding to those kind of requests. They then get referred on to the ICO for enforcement. Now, but yeah, I do look for different angles in things to make life difficult for some people. And
it's a terrible attitude to take.
No, but it's a good. I tell you what, these backers, there are thousands of them, and they are desperate. There's actually a Facebook group called Microdrone for Disappointment, and at this point, it has almost 400 members. Really? 400 members of a couple of thousand backers is a big majority. They need somebody to help them. And I guarantee if you could help this scenario here, they need a UK-based lawyer, barrister, somebody that understands the law and knows how to pursue this. We keep hearing the term class action, but that's very much a US thing, isn't it?
It is. So in the US, they have class action. But in the UK, we have what's known as group litigation orders.
We need you to help, right, Richard.
People get it mixed up all the time, don't worry. But no. I mean, it's an interesting proposition, definitely, and it certainly merits a conversational consideration. I mean, I think I come at it from the point of, and I was saying to Gary earlier, one of the reasons why I got into law is to really try and understand it so I could properly defend myself, and I believe that should be the same case for many other people out there who are being disadvantaged because they don't know the law or understand the law or have access to the law. And I do believe in access to justice, and I think it's a fundamental right that every person should have, regardless of where you come from, what you do, or how much money you've got in your pocket. Everybody should have some form of access to justice, and whether it's Gatwick couple that got arrested, and I've spoken about that before when I tried to phone up and do some pro bono work, and I couldn't even get through to the person who authorized them because that was confidential. I mean, it's just completely nuts to, these guys who have invested some of their hard-earned dollars and on the basis of somebody's representations, and suddenly, not suddenly, over a period of time, it's just simply not come to fruition. And then they're denying you the right to retrieve that through the terms and conditions that everybody's abided by.
Let me. I don't want to take up the entire stream on this, but I think I appreciate the time and I appreciate your input. This is great, and I know that there are backers watching this now because I've shared this into their group. I think if I drop you a message and any help and advice that you can provide, because these guys are very lost, even as I mentioned earlier, the UK-based backers don't know where they stand legally. And, quite honestly, when you get into this kind of scenario, even in the UK, it's very hard as a consumer to know what the hell do you do besides just writing it off as a bad mistake, not doing the due diligence that they perhaps should have done before they backed this, because I produced a video and a load of articles when the campaign started saying that it would fail. I don't want to say I told you so, but it's time after time. And I started what I do from a failed crowdfunder called Zano, which you might remember in Wales. And that's why I do what I do, to try and stop these guys wasting and losing their money. So I'll drop you a message, and I and they will appreciate any help that you can provide massively.
Ash, you should change what you've put in parentheses there. Instead of droning on, it should say, "I told you so."
That would be arrogant and annoying to people. I don't want to tell you so. That's why I write bloody articles in the first place.
Yeah.
But speaking about arrogant and annoying, and gentlemen, that's great. We'll come back to Richard in a minute because he is causing trouble. And it's a pity Louis not here, because we'll have some more Gatwick story in a minute. And I know Louis loves Gatwick. Louis should be on a plane to Brazil now. But I know Louis loves a bit of Gatwick, so I'll be a bit disappointed that he's not here for it live. We're talking about Troublesome, the dog handler. And then we'll come to Jonathan, who's quietly waiting there. Captain Dog Handler, I hear you've had communications from the Civil Aviation Authority over there.
Yes, it seems that there's been a long period of silence, but they I got a call last night, 7:30. I'd just gone to sleep because I'm having so much trouble with this Parkinson's sleeping. So I just got off to sleep for the first time in a long time, and I was woken by a phone call. And basically, the CAA is very much concerned about the effect that my videos are having on the wellness of staff. A lot of them are under a great deal of stress now, or some of them are under a great deal of stress. And they were concerned that people watching my videos were, making threats and sending nasty emails to members of staff, and so, which I don't agree with at all. In fact, this apparently happened with the first investigator. I put the email up, and people apparently emailed him directly and said bad things to him, and CIA rang me again, or the first time they rang me and said, look, can you call off these people, please, because it's not fair on the investigator. And I did a video saying, hey, don't contact the investigator directly, and please, keep it sane and sensible, and don't be rude and offensive, and that worked. So then I guess when the second investigator was brought into the scene, he allegedly also got some of these nasty emails, and they rang me again saying, can you please take down the videos that you've mentioned this guy? I only mentioned his Christian name, not his full name, but apparently people are so upset by this whole thing that they've done the research, found out who the person is, and they've contacted them and allegedly said nasty things. So I said, well, okay, fair enough. Can you send me copies of these emails so that I can see for myself they've said nasty things? But they can't, they won't. So I said, well, the burden of proof's on you guys. Your credibility with me is already very low because we're in the 11th week of a 1-week investigation. You set the expectation, and I don't think it's unreasonable for me to expect you to be less than an order of magnitude out. So the burden of proof is on you to prove that these allegations have some merits of substance. All you have to do is send me some copies of emails, just redact the personal information so I don't know who it is. No, they can't do that. So from where I stand, if you're not willing to back your claims with evidence, I can't really assign much veracity to them. But I have put a thing up this morning saying, don't be rude to the CIA, and we have to be seen to be professional and above this. So hopefully people won't send off emails being rude and nasty. But it does speak to the level of frustration within the community with regulators around the world, not just CAA. And one thing that amazed me, really shocked me actually, is since I started this campaign, in the last few days, I've had quite a few GA pilots contact me here in New Zealand, wishing me well and praising me for doing what I'm doing, because they've had similar, very, very unpleasant interactions with CAA, and to the extent that they allege bullying. But most pilots are not in a position to do what I'm doing. They've got too much to lose, and this is how it works. CAA can pull their license, and then the airplane's useless to them. All the investment they've had in training is useless to them. So CAA carries this massive, great stick that they can wield at any time. Me, they can't do a damn thing. So I'm in a position to say things and do things that the pilots can't do. So a lot of them have come to me, related their tales of woe. Businesses that have been allegedly shut down by investigators, being overly zealous and not really looking at the big picture, just focusing on the compliance. And so I've got a lot of backing, I think, within the model community, within the GA community. And I think the big problem that CAA has now is that when I complain, because they were complaining to me, this is hurting the mental well-being of investigators because they're getting all this flack. And I said, well, what about my mental well-being? What about the stress I'm under with this protracted investigation? Does that not count for anything? I said, and when I complained to CAA and said, look, I don't think it's fair that your complaint system's being weaponized to get at me by some Karen or some individual. You were completely unconcerned by that and the stress that would cause to me. You didn't give a damn, but you're asking me to have empathy because some of your investigators are a little upset because they've got some nasty emails. Well, it's a two-way street. And if you're not concerned about my well-being, I don't agree with anyone doing anything rude or offensive, but by the same token, I can understand why. And I'm a little disappointed that you have no empathy flowing the other way. But that seems to be based on the feedback I've had from others. That's the way it works. No empathy for anybody, but you've got to be respectful and everything. So I'm sort of sitting here thinking, well, where do I go from here? But I will continue. They wanted me to take down the videos. The video where I flew the little toy drone in my garden, they wanted me to take that down. And I said, no way, absolutely not. Because I think what's happened is, looking back at the figures, I think they get probably 300 complaints about drones every year, just looking roughly at the figures. It may be less, maybe 160. I can't remember the numbers. I'd have to look it up. So somewhere between 100 and 300 complaints. I have a feeling they've got about 10 years worth of complaints in the last week. And because when I said to them, why do you actually investigate this? Obviously, invalid complaints with no real credibility, like me flying a drone under a tree in a park, right? There's no threat to personal property. Why you even bother investing time in that and annoying me, bothering me, stressing me by starting an investigation into that? Why can't you triage these things and say, well, this is obviously a meritless complaint, we're not going to deal with that? And the response was, we have to investigate every complaint. So now we have a situation where they've got 10 years worth of complaints arrived in a week, and by their own policies, they have to investigate them. So if you're going to live by the sword, you die by the sword. I have no sympathy. If you're not prepared to say, well, this complaint against Mr. Simpson is completely groundless, we're not even going to bother him with it, then I have no sympathy for you when you have 10 years worth of work dumped on your desk in a week, because your policies have to apply both ways.
Oh, you're trouble. You're just nothing but trouble, are you? You're just nothing but trouble. Well, I completely hear you. Funny enough, I was having, and you see, Louis obviously sensed we're going to talk about Gatwick, arrived, and but I was talking to somebody about, I'll drop my Gatwick £2 thing, but then the investigation thing as well comes. That I landed a balloon once north of London, and somebody called the emergency services and said I'd hit some power lines, which I hadn't. And I was there, and a copper arrived on a bicycle, and that all was good. And I said to him, "Oh, afternoon," he says, and then I could hear sirens coming from everywhere, sirens coming from absolutely everywhere. And I said, "What's going on?" He says, "Well, unfortunately, because of what somebody said on the phone, we've had to call all the services and not all coming." I said, "Can't you call them off?" He says, "Nope, everyone's coming now. There's nothing we can do." And it was so embarrassing having 4 or 5 fire engines, several. It would have been nice if I had hit them, several ambulances and all the other stuff that arrived. So it's probably just the same in your case. And as you've exactly said, you know, there's a bit of paper that says we get a complaint and this is what we do next without any thinking to it. And they've just got to go through the motions. So they didn't say, well, I'll tell you what, Mr. Simpson, we'll give you the results of your first problem this week, and then we'll move on to the next one. They've not moved that forward. That still remains on a desk.
No, they're going to look into that. So they're going to talk to the department involved in that. Because remember, CIA is a whole lot of different people. They never talk to each other. They all sit on their own desks with little iron curtains and little COVID screens. They never seem to talk to each other. So no one knows what anyone else is doing. When I spoke to the second investigator, he knew nothing about the first investigations. And the person I spoke to, last night. Yeah, the person I spoke to last night knew nothing about the progress of my other investigation. So it's like nobody knows what's going on. There's no coordination. And the thing that is most interesting is that it was just a few months ago that the whole culture of CIA was subject to investigation. They found a culture of bullying, and that took scalps at the highest level. The highest level in CIA resigned. But I think no lessons have been learned from that. There is still a culture of bullying going on, and it's a culture of bullying people outside the organization. You know, we've got the power. We are the investigators. You'll do what I say. And some of the stuff that was related to me by pilots, unbelievable. You know, I mean, my goodness, you wouldn't think that that sort of thing would happen, but it does, because they know they have the ultimate power to pull a license. So people are going to have to take it. You know, what can they do? They can do nothing about it. Me, they've got no control. What can they do to me? I mean, they can ban a 67-year-old man from flying toys. I don't think that's going to happen. But if it does, I'll take the hit for the team, because this really needs to be taken out into the public arena, and people need to see what's going on. It's election year here in New Zealand. I have emailed the Minister and the Shadow Minister of Transport, alerting them to this situation. I filed an Official Information Act request seeking all the correspondence, internal memos, and data related to my investigations. I just want everything out in the sunshine. It's best disinfectant, and that's why I'm not pulling down any videos, and I'll continue to document this progress, because it's important that people see what happens when you are the subject of an investigation by the regulator.
Now, speaking of evidence, Jonathan's been sitting there very quietly. Hopefully when he unmutes his microphone, he'll be vivid in sound if he is there. Oh, he's certainly not crackly. Now, evidence there. So Richard's mentioned evidence. The dog handlers mentioned evidence. Jonathan, you've got evidence that of something about drone sightings. What evidence have you got, and how are you? Lovely to have you back.
Yes, so I went through the FAA drone sightings data that goes all the way back to 2014, published all that on my website, and it's very interesting to note that the drone sightings were widely publicized, right, as justification for we need to crack down on them, but there wasn't really much investigation going on to what is a sighting. Are the sightings actually like of bad drones or just mere sightings? What's going on there? AMA later on actually put out some reports estimating it's about 3.5%. 3.5% was of some problematic drones you could consider. maybe not directly intentionally bad, but problematic. And so I took all that data, put it together, and what I found out was that the drone sightings actually decreased overall from in 2019 compared to 2018, 6.76% drop. So even if we're going to play the sightings game and use that number to kind of like blow things out of proportion, we're now actually downtrending over the past about 5 quarters of sightings. And if we get into all of that, what is a sighting, right? It's somebody calling it in saying, I saw a drone, and the FAA reports it. And it's not scrubbed for lawful flights. So what's interesting there is that there's been all sorts of airspace authorizations that have been granted near airports. I've documented it. There's been at least 207,000 authorizations to fly drones near airports. I can at least point to that. So out of all of these sightings, is it possible that we have drones being identified near airports that were completely lawfully operating under the 207,000 COAs near airports, right? So there's this big inflated number, but it's not really carefully explained or anything. But now at least that bad large number that everyone keeps citing is starting to head in a downward trend.
It's interesting, isn't it? Bruce just mentioned sunlight and all that, best disinfectant, and it is facts. And we seem to be piling up many facts to use against the regulator, against the made-up facts that are getting thrown back at us all around the world. But we'll come back to that a bit more. So, what's the hot news of the legal world in America at the moment? Is there any dodgy drone legalness going on, or is everything tickety-boo and running on rails?
There's stuff.
I forgot how Jonathan's answers went. There's stuff.
Very comprehensive answer. Very comprehensive.
Very, yeah. I think I'm going to have to take a few minutes just to let that sink in and the ramifications of stuff.
Yeah, might be some stuff happening to some people regarding some things. So.
Oh yes.
Yeah, there's. I mean, pick where do you want? It's kind of like going through a buffet line, and you're asking like about food, and we're like, okay, we're talking about salads here, the meats, the potatoes. What are we talking about? I mean, you have people that are getting arrested for flying their drones, and they're getting arrested under color of state law. We have issues where the FAA is investigating people, ramping up enforcement actions there with penalties and suspensions. So yeah, there's stuff going on around in the drone world here in the United States.
Jonathan, this whole federal versus state thing. I mean, it's happening with marijuana. It's happening with drones. How's this going to pan out?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, so the marijuana thing. Okay, so so the issue with aviation in the United States is that it is a federal issue, and 49 USC section 40103 specifically puts airspace in the federal domain. It said it's the exclusive jurisdiction of the United States government, the federal government, not the state government. So that gets very problematic when the states, towns, counties want to start regulating airspace. And then in that same passage, you have, in that same section, 40103, it says that the United States citizen has a public right of transit through the navigable airways. So now you have an issue here where you have a federally granted right that is being infringed upon by a state or local entity. We have a whole preemption issue with constitutionality here that's getting brought up, as well as potentially maybe even enforcing state laws, maybe in a civil aspect, right? So that's all going to come to a fruition here more and more. That's the big overarching theme that's happened in the last couple of years is how can you enforce any of these state laws when we're talking about a purely federal issue? think of it kind of also along the lines of like immigration or something. It's only federal.
That's very much your purview, isn't it, Richard? You're working on stuff like that at the moment.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it's part of my PhD in drone law with Cranfield. I certainly think that in the future we're going to see a lot more of local councils becoming almost local airspace managers or something like that, because local laws will have an effect on UTM, and I think that's going to have some degree of impact on the way that we are seeing drone operators having their rights infringed. And there are a number of case studies around at the moment, not just in the UK but certainly in the US. I mean, I know that obviously in the US, within a couple of years of the drone laws coming out, 40 odd states put in their own regulations to try and constrict or make it more appropriate to the way that they see drone regulation being used. And we're certainly seeing it here as well in the UK. You've got I pick on the London Ports Authority quite a lot, because they want to regulate who flies over the Thames because they want to earn some cash. But all of these kind of tourist organisations in the UK are looking at raising cash on the back of filming. So what they do is they just plug in the drone and say, "Oh, because you're filming and it's a drone, we have to charge you a fee." And go for it.
That sounds. I don't know. Sorry, go on.
Oh, well, sorry, yeah. But Richard, the London Port Authority has been told by the CA several occasions that you've got no jurisdiction on flights over the Thames. The only thing they have any kind of jurisdiction on is if the drone takes off from their land or on the Thames. No council or anyone else in the UK, the CA has been quite clear. We're the regulator, that's it. And they've said this to Network Rail, who said you can't, flying over train lines or near them. The CAA's gone, if they're following the rules, you get no say. It's us that are the regulator. And they've told the port authorities a few times this as well.
Yeah, so what some of them are doing is they're actually saying, much like in the US where they put in what's known as secondary legislation. So primary will be in the UK, the Civil Aviation Act, and the secondary legislation that we've got would be something like an air navigation order with regulations, right? What sits below that at the council level are bylaws. And what they can do is put a bylaw in place, but it's got to go out to public consultation. But one of the fundamental principles behind a bylaw is that you must not duplicate existing legislation. So
it sounds like Bristol, around the Clifton Suspension Bridge. There's no CAA restriction around flying around that Clifton Suspension Bridge, but there is a local bylaw that says you're not allowed to fly your drone around it. Not even just taking off from the land, but flying your drone anywhere near it.
Okay, so I would look at challenging that bylaw, because I would want to know when they went out to open consultation to understand that. Exactly. And I'd want to know what it is that they're doing that isn't duplicating existing legislation.
But you know what the thing is, Richard, they don't need to, because it's enough to scare the amateur drone operator from even doing it. They know that most amateur drone operators won't even think about questioning it.
Yeah.
Sadly,
there's another.
I had it up here.
Well, I remember there's one thing here in New Zealand, our local council, they've sidestepped the bylaw thing, because they passed a bylaw that says all drone flying must be done in accordance with this policy, and they can change the policy without public consultation.
You can't enforce a policy.
What's really interesting, though, a lot of them now, so a lot of councils and even the National Trust and a lot of the others, they're now saying follow CAA guidelines, because they've realised that's all they can do. That's all they can do. The rule is 30 and 50 metre separation, or the 150 from congested areas and the organised events. They can't enforce anything, and it's becoming more and more common. But in the UK, as Richard said, when did that bylaw? Because to change a bylaw or bring one in is not an easy task by any stretch. It takes a long time.
It is, and it's quite an expensive route for a local council to go down. Because it is a whole process. But what was interesting about the London Ports Authority is they actually purported to have a bylaw in place. The research that I carried out, there wasn't one.
Does it cost them, Richard? What does it cost to get a bylaw in place?
They have to go out. They have to, first of all, draft a reason as to why they need a bylaw. Then they have to go through a whole process in committee stage, I think, around local councils in order to design the bylaw. Then they have to go out to public consultation and involve all the stakeholders. That then comes back for committee, and they then determine whether or not they can put a bylaw in place within the rules set for local government. What they have to be able to justify, though, is that they are not duplicating existing legislation. Now, we all know that the A&O sets out the regulations quite clearly as to what we can and what we can't do. And especially if you've got, a PFCO or an OSC in place, you've gone through that whole process of risk mitigation, operations manuals, insurance, and everything else to demonstrate that you're a safe operator. And I think that they don't get. I mean, to give you a quick case example, I live in Scotland. I went to Stirling Monument. Big signs, no drones here, no flying drones here. I thought, let's see where this goes. Phoned up the people that run Stirling Monument, so private company. They said, yeah, you can't fly a drone around here. Okay. How do I get permission then? Because it does say without permission. Oh yeah, you have to contact the local council. I said, give me their names, and I got a hold of local council and said, yeah, what we've done is because we get a lot of filming up here, we've basically put on the end of the form drones. You've got to produce your operations manual, copy of your insurance, evidence that you can fly, and all the rest of it. I said, well, that's duplicating existing legislation, and not only that. You don't own the airspace, so you can't stop me flying around. And on the side, it was a £200 fee. And I said, so you're charging me £200 fee then to take off and land on your property?
£200?
Yeah. They said, no, we'll waive the fee on this time. To be fair to them, full disclosure. They said,
how
no, you don't have to pay. I said, oh, great. I said, so we are in agreement then that if I don't want to take off and land, during the time frames that you're setting for me, that I can fly around so much. Yes, you can fly around that. I said, well, great. I'll find another piece of public land that I can take off and land from safely, conduct my flight safely, and that's great. Okay. But they then realized that I'd taken them beyond the scope of what they thought their power was. Right? They then realized that actually, if people want to fly their drones around Stirling Monument, they actually can't stop me from doing it, much like the Bristol Bridge, much like over London, apart from certain areas of London that we all know about. So those kind of, and some of it is just the fact that the local councils, in fairness to them, don't have a full understanding of it, and they don't have the resource to deal with it. And, I put a paper out on this a couple of years ago now, and Gary's fully aware of this, about the conflict between local councils and government. And, a lot of people that could deal with it and make it much easier in terms of helping out PFCO holders and the like earn a decent wage, just buried their heads in the sand, unfortunately. But it is going to absolutely become a growing issue, and especially when UTM becomes much more involved. And if you look at the current EASA's U-Space opinion, you could have a number of U-Space UTM providers operating the same airspace, all trying to get local information from councils to make it applicable for safe flight for manned and unmanned aviation.
Well, so basically, I think it's becoming easier to use the general aviation rules. So we should start flying our drones above the 120 meters. So because it's so much easier, and with all those crazy zoom lenses that we have today available today, we just go and follow the general aviation rules. Why should we bother with specific drone rules if everybody and their dog is trying to get legislation to milk the drone operators?
There's a bit of a difference when
you can overfly any of those bridges, any of those monuments with a general aviation. So you just get yourself an helicopter and you can overfly them.
There's a bit of a difference when you're up there in the aircraft and your life is at risk, as opposed to flying a toy in the sky. I mean, we have to
skin in the game. The regulators roll that out. They say, "Oh, it's all right. Pilots have skin in the game." Yet, if you look at the number of GA accidents just in the last couple of weeks, planes hitting towers, buildings, streets, hitting each other, GA is out of control. And there's been too many collisions in the USA in the last couple of weeks alone, with the loss of a couple of dozen, 7 and 1, and I forget how many in the other. This skin in the game thing, it doesn't hold any. You can't say that. It doesn't.
It does. No, it does when you are up there and your life is at risk. Whereas flying a drone, you have absolutely almost zero accountability for your own life. You're not responsible for your own life when you're flying a little toy drone up there. But when you're flying a helicopter or a plane, you are up there. You are responsible for life, including your own and others. So come on.
Why do so many pilots make so many bad decisions? Why do so many pilots take unreasonable risk, make bad decisions? If skin in the game was a universal thing, that's fine. And also remember that unmanned aviation is by far the greatest or the safest aspect of aviation. So even although you may be not taking so many precautions or taking greater risks, the consequence of those risks is so much lower that the overall risk factor is lower than manned aviation.
You say that. Okay, you flying your drone up there may not bring a plane down, but you may still cause hundreds of thousands of pounds of damage to a helicopter. Are you going to pay for that with your drone? If your drone,
that's what insurance is for.
Yeah, my insurance would.
And yeah, insurance would. And then what happens to your policy next year, as we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of drone operators in the air hitting?
That is why that's a regulating force, just like skin in the game, isn't it?
It's a better regulator. Ensuring insurance and requiring insurance is a much better idea than an appropriate amount of insurance than a lot of the nonsense hoops that people are being jumped through.
And that's why the ultimate risk analysis is done by insurance companies, and that's why drone insurance is so damn cheap compared to virtually every other form of insurance, because the risks are so low.
Are you sure, Bruce? In here, the drone insurance, you pay the same as you would pay for a Cessna 182, because it's their lowest scale.
Well, I mean, today, a plane went down in Essex in a field. Yes. I don't know if you saw that. We lost a general aviation plane crashed today. I mean, the risk is, it's different because we're not sat in the aircraft, okay? But as Bruce has said, it's really, they've hit power lines, they've hit all kinds of stuff. They've even hit each other in midair, yet we fly within 500 meters. We can see our aircraft. The chances of us hitting a helicopter, only people doing what I would call something silly would, be really at risk or pushing the envelope.
But you have to remember that's now. There is a minority of drone operators in the air.
There are more drones than manned aircraft by an order of magnitude, and more drone pilots than actual pilots by an order of magnitude. And in the whole 10 years that we've been doing this with much greater numbers, not one fatality.
Can I kill your statistics, Bruce? There are more manned aviation flight hours than unmanned aviation flight hours.
Yes. I wonder.
Statistics.
Hang on. Can we count Predator and Global Hawk hours? Because then we'll start.
Not only that, Bruce. Can we also count on HAPS drones?
Yes. Yeah. Bing. Count those hours.
High altitude satellites. They're the ones that fly for 24 hours around the planet.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example on very, very silly drone regulation, which is in Sweden here. And this surprised me. I published some video of a drone flight in Sweden, and somebody said, "Oh, have you got permission to publish that material?" And I said, "What?" And what I hadn't realized is that in Sweden, there's a government organization called Lantmäteriet, whereby if you capture any footage of the Swedish ground, which incorporates the horizon. So if you show the horizon, or if you show any certain objects or roads or buildings that are not residential, you have to get the footage approved by this government organization called Lantmäteriet before you can publish it anywhere. However, if you climb up a 50-story hotel and take the same shot from a hotel window with a camera or a phone, you don't need permission from Lantmäteriet.
Yeah, but don't worry. In Portugal, it's about the same, because for
Really?
every flight that you do with a camera hanging on a drone, or any photograph taken from a manned aircraft, you need a specific authorization from an Air Force department.
Wow.
What is good for us is that those guys of the Air Force are 5 stars, so they just issue and they tell you, okay, check with these authorities if you can take off and land from there. But yes, it's a 1958 law, and we all dread that law over here in Portugal, but we're okay with that.
Glad it's not just Sweden. I mean, I actually emailed them to say, why do I need to do this if it's from a drone, when it, you can capture the same shot from a camera, but you don't need permission. And they said it's for the protection of Sweden's total defense, as they call it. And what happens is, if they spot something in the footage that shouldn't be publicly aired, in other words, let's say you capture a secret base of some sort, they edit your footage and send that footage back to you, and you're only allowed to use that edited footage. So I'm thinking it's like a bit of a free editing service. If I ever need something removing from my footage, I'm going to send it to them.
And couldn't you capture similar things by standing on a hill with a camera and a long lens?
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
And you should have asked them, is it okay if the footage is taken with a smartphone? If they said yes, take your smartphone to the drone.
I checked. Okay, interesting. Yeah.
I would have also added to the bottom of your email, well, we're in the transition period of Brexit, so where do I stand on January 1?
Well, I'm screwed. They might deport me back to the UK at the moment.
Given the CV situation, that's not a bad thing. I think Sweden's still doing pretty badly, isn't it?
No, we're doing better here. We never had
herd immunity.
We didn't ever have a lockdown here, and our rates are plummeting now. Whereas the rest of the world, of course, they haven't had a lockdown, and so all the lockdown does is delay the inevitable. It's going to spread. Everyone's going to get it. I tell you what, I'm so glad to have been here throughout this whole saga. We think we've had it, actually. It's about 3 months ago. Everyone's going to get coronavirus, COVID-19 at some point. So all you do is delay it by having a lockdown. I'm glad we're here because I've been able to enjoy life. The economy's thriving. Our careers are still going. We haven't been made redundant like multiple people in the UK, many friends and family. So it is what it is. I've been able to go out and fly my drones and enjoy life. That's what it's all about.
It's a tricky old thing, isn't it? Can I pull up a sandbag? You know that's bad news whenever I say that. On that airspace thing years ago, I got into trouble. Flying an airship over, I think it was the very last Formula One race in South Africa. And I did not realize that when you look carefully at the NOTAMs, the F1 people have actually put the danger areas even around the horizon. So as you trundle past with your advertising on the horizon, so the danger areas corresponded with the camera shots, which I didn't realize. Because and I got into trouble for trundling in the back of a shot because I was supposed to, because it's advertising. But anyway, so yes, there is lots of interesting stuff around what can be taken from the air. Now, Louis, I'm glad you're here because I want to jump onto your favourite topic now.
Oh my God!
And I know, Louis, I know you would hate it if we didn't do a little bit about Gatwick. Now, for those of you that are here for the first time, don't realise it, but one of Richard Ryan's claims to fame is he was a person of interest in the Gatwick debate. And that was a bit of a mistake for the police to pick him, because why was he living in the Gatwick area? Because, well, correct me if I'm wrong here, Richard, but basically he was still working for the CAA, I think, then, and he was still a lawyer for the CAA.
I just finished. Yeah, not long finished working for the CAA UAS unit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll let you pick up the story from there. But you were a person of interest.
Yeah, so yeah, it was interesting. So basically, I got a call from Detective Inspector to say, you're a person of interest. Can you come in for a face-to-face interview? And to cut a long story short, I declined the offer, and it didn't come with tea or biscuits. So I definitely declined the offer.
Hats off.
Yeah, thanks. And I then obviously, as you guys know, some of you know, that I put in an FOI request to find out how I become a person of interest, but to also understand the legal basis by which they use counter-drone equipment around Gatwick and what they used. And I put in a whole question set, essentially. Got an acknowledgement, as you'd normally expect from an FOI request, to say, yeah, you'll have your data within such and such time. Didn't turn up. I wrote to them again, chasing them up, gave them the obligatory, I think it was another 28 days that the ICO suggests that you give them. So I did that. It didn't turn up. So I then launched it formally with the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, to say, look, they haven't produced the information. They wrote to them, gave them another, I don't know, this time I think it was 40 days, something like that. Nothing turned up. No correspondence at all. So then the pandemic hit, and the ICO took the view that the police need to resource appropriately. Okay, I understand that as a matter of principle. But what's going on? Well, the ICO, we don't know. We've asked them to get back to you. I said, well, it's now a couple of months since we've done that. Still nothing. So the ICO are at this point ready to launch their own solicitors onto Sussex Police to force them to produce the information. And just as they're about to do that, I get an email from Sussex Police using every exemption under the sun that they can under the Freedom of Information Act to prevent giving me answers to questions. And the ones that related to me as a person of interest, they then gave me a Data Protection Act request form to fill out. So why is it it's taken almost a year for them to give me a Data Protection Act request? Why is it that they did not, when they gave me the letter with all the exemptions, they did not apply the relevant exemption against each question that I asked? So now I've asked them that, and they've designated that as a formal complaint. And I've gone back to the ICO again to say, look, this is now a formal complaint. What action are you taking, and what's within your powers to sanction Sussex Police for this inexcusable delay? Of which I've got, well, we've given them another 10 days, which I think expires next week, for them to resolve your complaint. And so let's see what happens. But I mean, every trick in the book to avoid giving me what I'm rightfully due, in law.
And speaking of books, don't forget to buy Richard and I. We've both written this book together, How to Win Friends in Halls of Power.
Yeah. Are we still winning, friends? That's great. That's good to know. So it's been a long journey, but I think the point is here, and Gary and I spoke about this before, is that when people put in a Freedom of Information Act request, they don't know how far to push these things. They don't know what the ICO's powers are, and how the ICO can actually hit. They do have a stick, but they are quite often reluctant at using it, because ultimately you could argue it's one public body beating up another public body, which doesn't really serve central government's interest, perhaps, might be an argument. So let's see what happens. And, I'll publish the information I get, which I have done already. So, yeah.
I can't, the plod must be so regretting having felt your collar over this, of all the people to have picked up and tried to pull in for Gatwick. What a terrible.
Yeah, I mean, what I truly don't understand, Gary, is I'm a practicing barrister. I literally not long had finished working for CAA, which included a number of different inspections in different places in the UAS unit, ratified every BV loss permission in the UK from ground up to space, and I become a person of interest. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's our forever. Nicola's away. Cheers, Nicola. Look after yourself. We'll see you again soon. It brings our ever cyclical conversation about remote ID, regulators having everyone's name and addresses and what they're going to use it for. Oh, they're never possibly going to abuse the fact that they've got your name on a list somewhere. That'll never happen. Never ever happen. We've been doing this for 5 years.
I've actually still trying to get out of the CAA remote ID and what's actually required. And that's still the question. I meant to have some guy in me.
But that seems to be moving along. That does seem to be things happening in the background all around the world, and nobody knows the actual requirements anywhere. But things people, the odd bit of paper comes out saying we've used box 74 and it seems really good, or that thing from that company is very cool. And it's like, oh, what are you all doing in the background?
Well, why have we got this thing like with these recent mid-airs in the USA and all of this? Why isn't TCAS a requirement, a mandatory requirement in all manned aircraft? TCAS would save lives. Last week it would have saved, over a dozen lives. Why are they requiring that drones have to have a remote ID system? Not a single death attributed, mind, but we've got mid-air collisions which increasingly are taking human lives on a regular basis, but we don't need TCAS. And you don't even need a radio in Class G airspace, but the drones have to have this new high-tech stuff. This is obviously not being driven by safety imperatives, and I think for anyone to suggest that it is very disingenuous, and I think we need to look more closely at what is driving this, and it's all down to money.
Sadly.
What's really interesting about remote ID, so people get mixed up between talking to a UTM and remote ID. They are completely separate things. The idea behind remote ID is someone can have a phone, they can see a drone, they can connect to it there and then and see that flight information there and then. It doesn't store that information, it doesn't send it anywhere, it doesn't do any of that. But the CAA can't answer the questions. What about aircraft that aren't designed to take that extra 100-gram payload? Because this thing's got to transmit. If you imagine trying to stick it onto an EB can't take its centre of gravity alterations. It's got no space to add the extra payload. So I said to them, well, what happens in 2 years then to an EB? Come on, if it can't have this remote ID. And the questions then become, how far does it have to transmit from the drone to be able to be picked up by a mobile device? Because it has to be picked up by any mobile device. It cannot have an app on it. It's not meant to be special in any way. So a Wi-Fi will only transmit, 30, 50 meters, and it's got to somehow get past the DJI signal or any other 2.4 signal that's going to blast it out anyway. So, they can't answer the question, how far has it got to transmit from the drone even? So you could see one at 80 meters away and you never pick it up. So it's really interesting.
I've had about 350 meters range out of a Wi-Fi drone in the past. So the range can be much further, actually.
It does depend. I mean, my house Wi-Fi can get wiped out by my DJI Phantom 4, and I have my iPhone right next to it, and it'll just wipe it out. So it does vary.
But there is another problem because in the EU, you've got this listen before transmit protocol necessary on 2.4. So if you've got a transmitter on your drone that's transmitting almost continuously video back down, there may not be any slots available for the transponder or the remote ID to actually broadcast.
Yeah, and what's really interesting, they wanted the remote ID to know when the aircraft has entered like an emergency, like RTH mode. They want that little device to know when the drone's entered RTH. And that device, and I went, well, hang on a minute. How's it going to work on DJI? Because you stick this device on it, it's completely independent of the drone itself, technically. It doesn't plug in anywhere.
It's not such a problem because you have to throw away everything you've got and get new ones. Come on. And by the way, just a small correction, the French guys already have a system in place, and they've mandated to do their remote ID, and it's Wi-Fi based, it's open, and there are already alternatives on the open source market to implement that. So will that system prevail? I'm not sure. French guys tend to go ahead and implement things ahead of everyone, trying to make it as a standard. Let's see if it works.
Minitel.
Minitel, yes, Bruce.
I mean, I'm all for them as long as they're not talking to a UTM, because I don't see how UTM is going to make air that much safer anyway.
Oh, come on. You don't have a business perspective. You really must understand that this is for many people, more than are here on this podcast, for many people, this is a big bucks business. So they're trying to milk out every little cow they see on the fields, and we are the little cows that they see on the fields. So they have to milk us heavily to get money.
I was sorry, Ash.
Go on. I was going to say, I still think the biggest farce here is that the people that abuse the airspace will be the ones that don't. They'll down flash to older firmware. They won't use AirSense anyway. It's only the likes of us on this call now that are responsible, that feel that we have to do this because we must, because it's a legal requirement. It costs us more money, more time, and more inconvenience. The people that actually fly around airports and in protected airspace will continue to do so regardless of this anyway. That's the biggest farce here. There's no way, just like speeding and joyriders, you can do whatever you want with a car, but someone who's going to steal a car and joyride it is never going to respect a 70-mile-per-hour speed limit or 110 kilometers an hour if you're in Europe. The rest of Europe.
By definition, lawbreakers don't obey laws. Laws have no effect on lawbreakers.
Exactly.
I mean, murder's been illegal for how many years, but we still have murders every year.
Exactly.
It's an implicit contract, Bruce. If you're a lawbreaker, you don't respect laws. You're mandated to not respect laws.
Exactly.
It's going to be the same.
Why the drone bill's drafted the way it is, because the drone bill is all about capturing criminals, smuggling contraband into prisons. It wasn't drafted with PFCO holders in mind. The fact that you can have your equipment confiscated, or you can have a police officer tell you to land your aircraft and come within your 30-meter zone, apparently, is just incredulous.
I guess a question for you, Richard. I guess the justification for this, despite it inconveniencing the decent people like us on this meeting now, the justification for this is to give them ammunition in court. So if they do take somebody up on law breaking, having a case law gives them ammunition. It gives them justification for actually taking them to court and pursuing a conviction. Whereas if they didn't have these laws, didn't have a requirement for AirSense, they essentially wouldn't really have a statute to take them to court.
We do. We have Article 241. You've got to conduct your flight safely. So,
right.
Under the ANO, and the CAA do have the power to launch criminal prosecution.
But isn't that civil, not criminal?
Sorry? No,
is that civil, not criminal?
No, you can suffer a criminal penalty.
Ah, okay.
Some people have been prosecuted in the UK. I think the first case was the chap who had his drone recovered from a river that had flown past the submarine base.
Yeah, the submarine base.
Wasn't that it? Yeah. So he had his drone recovered from the river by the police, and that's how he got captured. And I think he was the first prosecution in the UK. So that wasn't conducting a flight safely. I don't know the exact regulations he's prosecuted under, but I would imagine that 241 would definitely be in there somewhere. But the powers that we're now seeing go far and above beyond what they need to capture people like you and I. And I'm grateful to Gary. He published a letter on SUAS News, a letter to my MP, which is a template letter. Anybody can send to their MP to lobby them at the moment to change the law, because at the moment the law is going through the House of Lords. So I've spoken to a few members of the House of Lords to exempt current PFCO holders from it. And then it will go down to the House of Commons, and people need to start hammering the House of Lords and their MPs in relation to this drone bill as it makes its way through.
I'm already doing it.
Did you see the letter?
Yeah, I did adjust it slightly, and I emailed.
I'm not offended.
It's fine. I emailed directly to Grant. Is it Schnaps or whatever his name is?
Schnaps, yeah.
I went straight to him and my local MP because it doesn't need all, like you say, doing it, and it doesn't matter if it's hobby flyers or not, PFCO or hobby. I don't mind. Yeah. It's overkill for what it is. When the YASA regs kick in, the 30 and 50 meter rule are just going to be irrelevant almost anyway.
Yeah, they will be. And even when the House of Lords have been discussing it, some members of the House of Lords, even in conversation, and I've read the Hansard reports that come out of the Houses of Parliament. They've even said themselves that this is bad law. It's drafted poorly.
That's good.
So it's just, but the point is the Baroness responsible for the DFT is holding firm because that's government policy at the moment. It's only through lobbying that members of the House of Lords today and your MPs will you actually affect a change in the law as it's drafted now before it becomes law. This is the last opportunity that we have as a community to try and influence a change in the law.
Yeah, well, I'm all for that. I mean, it's just I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It is a rabbit hole, isn't it? It is a.
I mean, if you wanted to do drug smuggling, what was it? There was that America. Was that in America? Those planes got caught doing the drug smuggling. Was it this week? Last week?
There was a plane crash in Australia, just out of Australia, trying to ferry some drugs out. I think it was.
Yeah,
it's too heavy. You wouldn't take off. Yeah.
Well, I don't get why these guys just don't. You know, this is going to sound terrible, but literally, you could put a Pixar Hawk, get a microlight, and just set it on its way. You know, you could take the person out of it. It sounds terrible. You could put an autopilot in it. 100 kilos of drugs. There you go. There's your microlight as well. Send it back when you've done.
Yeah, I had a bit of trouble doing that, though. I tried that. It didn't work as well as it should.
No, but I can get a ton of drugs in a van. But anyway, it's unfortunately, I can bring Gatwick back in then, but the Gatwick was used so much as an enabling tool for all of this and justification. And that's the shocking thing about Gatwick. That's why it's got to be exposed. And so we can finally stop talking about it so Louis can be less annoyed.
Can I just say, before you stop...
It's just that is a topic that is so cloudy and so full of question marks all around that I'm sure that we won't see the end of it anytime.
No, I think you're right.
Just before we stop talking about Gatwick, I've just noticed I've just seen a news article that says the Sussex Police Force are now selling some of the confiscated drones on their eBay page.
No.
Ironically, it includes a caption saying, "Please ensure that you familiarize yourself with the applicable laws before using this."
I wonder if they've still got the drone registration attached to those drones, and I wonder if there's a problem with that in terms of identifiable information.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yes, identifiable information.
So, Sussex Police is opening a department from Banggood, apparently. So,
yes, please, put the link in. I want to see that. Put the link.
Put a question. Ask if it's suitable for delivering drugs to a prison.
Yeah.
I can't share it on the YouTube chat, but I'll share it here, and you can post it out. I'll put it in the private chat.
I mean, I'm actually tempted to do a video on, Gatwick and why it was so badly done. But the person in charge of Gatwick that said ground the planes, after about 3 hours, he did it for 3 days. He shouldn't be in the job he's in, to be honest, because it was bad management all the way through that.
I think it would have been chicken. There would have been chicken little.
We are not on his shoes, so he has so many things to balance. Let's give him the benefit of the doubts.
But Louis, you really have to consider the fact that before Gatwick drones, I would say on any airport's board of directors risk register, drones would have been in the top 3.
I agree.
Years before it happened. So what did they do? What did their insurers say they should be doing? What did the insurers advise they should be doing to mitigate the risk against drones?
And you don't want to be the guy. You don't want to be the guy that says it's fine to carry on flying consumer flights, and then one of those £1 million planes hits a drone and causes tens of thousands of pounds of damage. You don't want to be the guy that prompts that and then gets sacked.
Well,
so why don't they ground planes when there's birds at the airport again?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, I've done that.
They do.
Only until birds are gone.
And remember that these drones can only fly for what, 30 minutes? He grounded it for 3 days.
Yeah, but there was reports of multiple drones, and you recharge batteries quickly. So put yourself in his shoes.
Has anyone explored the alternative view that I still think it's a conspiracy theory of the airport being being on sale, and the sale being effective around that time, and perhaps
I put a video out about
5G
that.
towers around?
I put a video out about that theory. However, the transaction had already completed at that time. The sale had already completed.
Sorry, Ash, go on.
These rental employees not happy with the sale.
You must have watched my video, because that's my video that I put out about disgruntled employees being unhappy about the sale.
Yeah,
but I was told by a commenter that the transaction had completed at the time when these drones were flying. So it was just the due diligence, everything. The transaction was finished. It was done.
I think that if it was the ATC system that had crashed again, because it had crashed before. So I'm wondering if the air traffic system had gone down. I don't think,
Another big
you can see why we're switching to UTMs. It's so much easier to say than ATC.
That was the other big theory, that they were trying to compensate for another big major system failure that would have caused them to pay compensation to the operators. But I think we're thinking too much into this, to be honest. I think my theory is that this was an exercise, a practice run by people like Extinction Rebellion. And when they realized that by threatening that there were drones in the sky, it could have such an impact, that's when they did it again, just 6 months later or so, when they actually said they will do it. I think it was a practice run to see what kind of reaction they would inspire, and it worked.
So it was general practice for these flu virus that is crossing all over the world. So it's a general rehearsal. Nobody.
yes.
If only we'd burnt down those 5G towers earlier, wouldn't have these problems.
Yeah, we don't have the guy that throws down the 5G towers.
I don't think there are any 5G towers left, are there?
Wait till winter comes; they'll make good kindling.
Oh no, not winter is coming.
That reminds me, guys.
Exactly.
That reminds me. I was flying near an airport the other week, and everyone's banging on about UTMs and how good they're going to be. I was just outside I was just near the M25, near this airport, working. And yet again, no mobile signal. And this was just inside the M25, which is the London Circular. Again, these UTMs, what system are they going to use that's reliable? That's what I want to know. Because at the minute, UK's mobile network is shocking.
Yeah, I've asked a mobile network company about this, and they promised that 5G is going to be the panacea to everything. And I said, well, I'm sure in your contracts, like I have with my mobile phone contract, like everybody on this call has, but there probably is a term in our contract that says we do not guarantee performance of our service, and we do not guarantee that you're going to have 100% connection all the time. So with that exclusion in place, and the fact that 5G are going to be a way of communicating in the UTM space, who's going to accept liability when we've got no 5G coverage and something happens?
Well, not only that, 5G will only exist in all the big cities. Okay, where are airports generally not?
Yeah.
And there's another thing that everyone's overlooked. Did anyone notice that the Amazon is going to be spending $10 billion building a thing called the Kuiper network, which is just like Elon Musk's network of overhead satellites providing internet connectivity? Amazon's also deeply into drone delivery. Amazon's also looking to UTM. Amazon is cementing another piece of the puzzle in place. They'll provide the ubiquitous global coverage through their satellite network.
Altitude Angel already has that through Inmarsat, larger device.
Yeah, but we're talking about everything,
Yeah. Well, Amazon might not have the physical thing doing it, but they'll have all the flipping patents for each part of the puzzle.
But they've just been awarded a license by the FCC to put these 3,000 satellites up.
Yeah, they have.
We're not going to see any stars, are we? Shortly, we're living in the last few years of being able
Kim
to see the
Kardashian
stars.
will always shine.
Yeah.
Oh well, of course, and always be on your heart in many ways. Yeah, Michael was talking about trying it in Central Queensland. Richard, they're doing some quite good webinar series on UTMs, and they are actually asking themselves hard questions of, are UTMs actually needed? So fair play to them. Again, quite how he's ever going to make any money, I don't know, being honest, because that's not how you make money in this business, as we've known, as we've seen from with Vernon Kurzweil. That's where we started. Ian saying major issues now. There's some guys trying to do long exposures. Oh yes, the satellite gig. So we've spoken around a few subjects now. Has anyone else seen any other news this week that we've not yet covered?
I don't know if it was this week or maybe it was last, but I thought it was interesting, the collaboration between the Swiss and the American regulators. And they're looking at how, I think, the whole UTM space, and they've signed a memorandum of understanding between the two countries on developing drones and airspace and its management and that kind of thing. So for me, that was an interesting move because, as we know, the FAA have received a lot of criticism over the last year or so in relation to the way that they've brought in various regulations. So going to a country that we know is sparsely populated, doesn't present much risk, and is doing BV loss now like it's going out of fashion, is an interesting venture, to be honest. But what I think it has done is it's highlighted the fact that other regulators now are going to be left behind as more regulators seek to learn from different experiences in a way that they're advancing the proposition of BV loss, UTM, and UAM. So I thought that was really interesting.
Well, that Swiss really is.
Sorry.
No, after you work in Switzerland.
Yeah, and to start with, my current employee is a company in Switzerland, in Zurich. So I have a vested interest on defending that. But the Swiss authorities are very keen on publicly announcing that the Zurich area is the drone valley.
Yeah.
So it is important to maintain that that image of the forefront of development of drones is based around Zurich. And we have ETH, that is a very well-known engineering school that has produced some very interesting products around that area, and has made several successful spin-offs from ETH. So it is important. I think it's more on the marketing side of things, that agreement between civil aviation and the Swiss authorities. By the way, Swiss rules are very good for us casual flyers and even for professional flyers. They are very easy to understand. So it would be nice if that's easy to understand and laws for drone flying would extend to other countries, but no way. It's just a marketing ploy on the part of FAA, because FAA is so keen on having good media that they even steal media from several famous YouTubers. So
they do. What I'll say about the Swiss is that for the drone delivery stuff here, my word, they chucked some money in it. I was slightly disappointed. I was invited to a party by the ambassador, and there were no Ferrero Rocher. So I was very, very disappointed about that. But they were serving pints of gin and tonic, so that got the thumbs up from me. But the money they chucked at that, it was impressive. So yeah, when they go for it, they certainly go for it. And
can I just ask, what's wrong with pints of gin and tonic?
Nothing at all. No, that got my notice. The lack of when you go to the ambassador's party, you're supposed to have Ferrero Rocher, aren't you? I thought that was some sort of law or mandate, and there wasn't.
Toblerone, isn't it?
Probably is.
Toblerone.
Toblerone, I'm all for that, but I have to say Ferrero Rocher is probably the most disgusting chocolate I've ever tasted in my life. The most overrated, horrible thing ever.
But it's wrapped in gold foil.
Exactly.
That's the only good thing about it. That's the only good thing about it.
And it comes in a pyramid.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
So does a Toblerone, kind of. It's like break the apart, build it up.
What's the signal? It's all in pyramids. I wonder if there's any eyes or anything like that about.
It's all about the Twix. It's all about the Twix.
That's good. This is degenerating to the correct level for this chat. Exactly right
Mad
level.
Tech Reviews says, now Ash, we're about to fall out. Sorry, Mads, I know to send you a Ferrero Rocher for Christmas.
Yeah, well, the Unique are going to Switzerland. That's where they're going to be based. They've moved out. Yep, they've moved out of America, and they're going. Oh, maybe I'm not allowed to say that, but Ian said it already, so that's okay.
But are Unique still relevant? Can I just ask that question?
I'm surprised they're still about, to be fair.
I am. Yeah.
I mean, who's backing that bad boy?
I thought they were gone.
I mean, they went with
the name of the lady that's taken over. Imagine I've said too much.
Maybe they could crowdfund. Go on Kickstarter.
The bright orange Typhoon. The bright orange Typhoon was very nice, and I loved its retractable undercarriage. But ultimately, even the commercial market don't seem interested in Unique. So, is there anything unique anymore about Unique, or are they?
Well, I don't know. What you could do is perhaps you could take your brand to somewhere where there's a major international university that does fantastic drone research, and you could park yourself there and get ready for the next products. I don't know, say in a country like Switzerland, for instance.
I think the problem is
products that need to be CE marked, perhaps.
These drone organizations keep struggling to create consumer aircraft. And so they say, okay, we're going to go to the commercial sector instead. And what do they do? Ooh, fire rescue, etc. It's so overdone now. I think we really need these manufacturers to start thinking out of the box. We need them to start thinking about some new industries where they can help. I mean, I was quite impressed by Skydio the other day, who now have announced a home patrol system, which is an interesting idea. I'm not sure how that would work in airspace and regulations, but at least they're thinking out of the box, which no other manufacturer except for DJI really are right now. And I'm just anxious, desperate to hear of a manufacturer working on some idea besides fire, rescue, and emergency services. Something new, not delivery. I'm sick of delivery as well, bloody Amazon. Something just new. Do something new with drones. Fix my car. Take my car for a service. Pick it up and deliver it somewhere. I don't know. Something new. Something new.
When I was with the
Tesla and drive yourself to the garage.
Yeah. Tesla needs to create a drone.
A good use case I found was when I was with the CAA and I was overseeing some of the safety aspects on the RNLI challenge. What they did was on cliff faces or areas where the cliff faces, and they needed to get somebody to be rescued around a cliff area. What they trialed was putting a drone up as a radio relay station to the boat down below. So to get around the geography of radio waves, that's what they used. And I thought that actually was a really good use of, close proximity rescue, but being able to use different resources within the RNLI framework. I thought that was a really good use case.
Why they don't send or drop a buoy further out in the sea when they're racing out with the boat and have that relay out rather than
because it would be parallel with the horizontal axis of the boat, and radio waves don't travel well over waves. So even if you've got choppy sea, radio waves get broken up by that. Radio waves don't travel well anywhere near water.
What's wrong with a stick? I don't know.
The solution is...
That's a good point. You could have a buoy.
But you do. They're called dam buoys, and they have a big stick on them, don't they, with a flag on top. But
I see a Kickstarter campaign coming here for the new high-tech stick.
What we need to do is we need to sort out the rules and regulations around it first. Make sure we shut the door behind us as we go.
Cover it in treacle so it's really sticky.
Yeah.
What
I think the people that are making money there are people making money in the drone space, and they're doing quite well, but they've got a genuine use case and they know what to do with the data. They know how to create the data, and they're plodding on. The stuff that looks good in marketing brochures, your fire and rescue, doesn't. Well, let's face it, fire and rescue generally don't have the budget to buy the things to start with. Although a good one this week was do you see the Schliebel is being used by the Coast Guard in northern in Wales now, and they're teaming and sending the S100 down.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? I'm just waiting for a Royal Canadian Mounted Police moment to occur.
Yeah,
or
or
to fly into the helicopter.
Because they do have a pretty unusual ground control station, or they did have in that. I don't know if they still do, but I mean that's a pretty good use case. And yeah, the Army made this big thing about it. Made me laugh. Or Kinetic made this big thing about teaming operations with a manned helicopter. And then the Coast Guard puts up the next day. Well, we've been operating with our manned helicopter on North Wales for a few weeks now. You know,
Isn't it safe, though? Is it safe to have drones near helicopters? We've been told it's not.
One's at 300 feet and the other's at 450.
Yeah, but that's what the Canadians thought when they flew their drone into the helicopter.
Yeah, but
yes.
Now in Portugal, for the fire season, the Air Force, it was announced today, the Air Force is deploying 10 VTOLs that fly around 8 to 10 hours. So they will do surveillance of fires. And they are coordinated with the firefighting planes, the Canadairs, and the helicopters there. So there is a way to do air traffic management on this situation. So it is very specific. Unfortunately, it's controlled by the Air Force. That we hope they know what they're doing. But the thing is, drones can be used in conjunction with general aviation, and in this case on an emergency scenarios. So let's see how it goes if we have less fires this year.
Yeah, you just had the same number. Let's hope they get put out. I had to go and help put out a fire today, actually. Let's hope they get put out quicker. Yeah.
You need to stop lighting those fires in your house, Gary.
Was it a lipo fire?
No, it wasn't. It was somebody grinding in their workshop.
That's another thing.
What? Grinding what?
Interesting.
Metal.
What?
Sparks come out. They were now outside working in the garage, and they set fire to their lawn.
I thought you were talking about grinding something, a certain illegal drug. I was going to say. Anyway.
Didn't you have a fire there a couple of weeks ago as well?
What's that?
You had another fire a couple of weeks ago, didn't you? You was worried about taking out the power as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's on the hill over the back. That's fantastic. That's about 25 kilometers of fire. That was in the end. Yeah, that was good. That didn't come across our way. This one was unfortunate. This one we went to today was only a couple of doors up the road, so it had to be put out just in case it leapt into our property. Yeah, no, that was impressive when the smoke cleared. As I say, it was very, very impressive. Fire patrols and fire suppression would be a fantastic use case here. We have the fire bombers as well. We have the little fire airfields. We have the fire towers everywhere. It would be great if they allowed something fixed wing, low level, plodding around all day, spotting stuff. It'd be fantastic. But we said our biggest risk now, and this will be the anti-drone thing in some ways, is that we're coming into August is the windy month, so it'll be gale force winds for probably at least 2 weeks of this month. So those drone systems probably wouldn't be in the air. Don't sell our living in sport.
Those balls are about 3 meters wingspan, so they should support some rough weather.
They'll just go backwards.
Yeah,
I think as for supporting the industry, I think we do. I think we do. I'll put this comment up, but it's just I think we have a terrible problem is we're a little bit realistic. that's the downside. But there is plenty of money to be made in this industry. You've just got to box clever about it.
I have one little question then for you guys. Yeah. So just falling back to Unique and their troubles, did they miss a trick when DJI was like in America was like no DJI at all? Where were Unique at that point? Why were they not taking advantage like Parrot did? What boat did they miss? Because they were an American company. What they should have done everything to take advantage of that, but they missed the boat, didn't they?
But this is the same challenge that every smaller manufacturer has: a lack of investment, so they don't have the budget to do what they want to do; a lack of effort, they don't really care. The bigger owner of the company, actually, it's just a subdivision that keeps the pennies rolling in, but only pennies. And so they don't really get any real significant investment. If you look at all of the big manufacturers out there that are thoroughly capable of producing an incredible consumer drone, Samsung, for example, Tesla, they could both produce probably drones far better than DJI can, but they just don't. And I think that's the challenge of Unique.
Why would you produce a consumer drone? That's over. That finished 2 years ago.
Why has he produced
We comply with the new EASA regulations.
Why did he do a flamethrower or those new shorts for the short sellers? Come on, he can do whatever he wants, and people will buy it, loads of it.
Yeah, but there has to be significant profit revenue for a big organization to bother entering a sector. And even the consumer market for drones is actually bigger, I would say, than the enterprise market for drones at the moment in terms of profit.
I'm not so sure about that. Given the current pricing structure, I'm not so sure, because we've seen the race to the bottom on the consumer drones, and we've seen a race to the top on industrial drones. So the margins are way more comfortable on the enterprise side.
Yeah, but the sales are lower on the enterprise side. More consumers are buying drones than enterprise organizations are buying drones.
I'm not sure. I don't have the cost structure, for instance, for the new Mavic, but they're not making that much profit out of it. They're just making the numbers. They sell a lot of it.
I have to say, I think if you look at the price of a DJI drone at the moment, a consumer drone, you're paying £1,000 for the Mavic Air 2, 1,200 euros or so. The cost of that drone, designed and manufactured in China, that's a significant amount of profit on each drone sold, in my opinion. Yeah, £1,200. £1,000 for a piece of hardware coming out of China that probably costs significantly less than that to manufacture.
100% profit margin, to say the least, on those drones. But on the smaller ones, the Airs that retail for $300, $400, they're not making that much profit there.
On the Mavic Mini, for example, £400 or so. Again, significant profit margin. That Mavic Mini, there's hardly anything inside that thing, and the electronics are all designed and manufactured in China. Significant profit. DJI have a monopoly. That's why they can charge what they do. I think they're making a killing over there at the moment, and they have no competition, really.
But funny enough is that we've seen, for instance, on the industrial side, they're playing around with prices of the newer drones. What is a baby?
They're not making clever decisions with battery sizes and stuff.
Oh my god! Don't tell me I've spent my entire day fighting with shimpy companies to get DJI batteries to Brazil. Don't get me started. MSDS, the DGD. I know lots of acronyms these days.
Louis, saying you're not getting the batteries that you need.
Oh my God! It's so people are so crazy with the lithium-ion batteries, lipo batteries. All the paperwork that one must fill is mind-boggling.
But isn't that why I thought? Or was that your previous company where you just used to buy the systems in country?
Yeah. But you know how much does? Just give you an example. A regular DJI M210 V2 RTK can cost around 12,000, 10,000 euros. In Brazil, 30,000. So it's not cost effective. That's the biggest problem. Even if you want to rent,
But you only have to buy the batteries.
no, not even the batteries. You can. It's not economical, viable to buy or rent. For instance, what we in Brazil. But there are countries where that is an option, and it's done. But the thing is, these days things are not so easy. And thank you, DJI, for making larger than 100 watt-hours batteries. Thank you. That was the smartest business decision you've made in several years.
Yes, they should. I struggle to believe that they did that. Everyone knows that ruling. It's surprising that anyone did that. Right. Look, we've gone very long here.
One more thing.
Go on then.
Are we all excited about the NASA drone going to Mars? We're all going to be watching that perched on the edge of our seats, waiting for it to take off and fly around?
No, sorry. Fly around, I think it flies around 1 or 2 meters each flight. I'm not sure of if it's 20 centimeters or 2 meters each flight, but I was looking at
the NASA video shows it flying heaps of distance.
Yeah. So, is it a drone or a jumper? So
no, it's a coaxial helicopter.
Yeah,
jumper.
That's its problem. That's its problem just there. It's a coaxial. So
should have used a trebuchet.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think you're right. It's 2 meters flying height, isn't it? And then it's like 10 meters from wherever or something. It's not flying very, very far.
Yeah, but
they'll still get in trouble with the CIA. 2 meters doesn't matter. You're still a hazard to aviation, even on Mars.
It's not just that. The other problem is they're now sending the programming to make it fly now. So when it gets there, it will be able to fly. The problem is the regulation. You're not allowed autonomous flight. So where's the pilot going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be right.
And what's a 40-minute latency round trip? There's nothing.
What's the airspace on Mars? I don't know. The Americans will flipping claim it now, won't they? They'll be in the American UTM. They were the first there. They'll say it's our airspace. Yeah, it's been an interesting bagatelle the entire time, hasn't it? The whole design of the thing and the whole stepping up a bit.
I'd love to have seen them tuning the PIDs in that big barometric chamber they've got at NASA. They must have put it in there to fly it first with all the air sucked out and tuned it up and made sure it doesn't wobble and fly all over the place. Would have been a fun thing to do. Great project.
But the multi-rotor actually replaced a glider, which I thought was a better idea. I think that was the original idea. It was to like slingshot a glider into the atmosphere and let that fly around. I thought that was more of a more interesting.
The atmosphere is so thin. The wing loading has to be incredibly high, and the flight speed incredibly fast.
Yeah. Then someone said, "Hey, we have no enough atmosphere to fly a glider in Mars. So come on."
Well,
where do you get the thermals from? Where are the thermals? You get those little willy tornado things, but that'll just spin you around. That'll confuse your Ardu planet.
Just say, Juzzle in the chat just said the spotter is using Hubble to see the drone.
It must be unaided. Spotters must not use technology to aid their vision.
That's right. You can't use it.
Yes. Not even a telescope. Surely that's allowed. It's optical.
No.
Corrective eyewear is the only allowed thing.
I think the spotter is going to be Matt Damon because last I heard he's still in Mars.
they need a volunteer to go and do the compass calibration. So if one of you could just nip over and do that for them.
Yes. And where the hell are they going to get GPS from?
I'd recommend doing that compass calibration dance when you're in zero gravity, because that thing's going to weigh quite a bit.
Yeah. I'll tell you another big one before we go. Well, it's been big on the channel because on SGS News, by some stroke of luck, for some reason, nobody else seemed to pick up well, they have now, but they didn't pick up the Royal Navy's press release about them using large multicopters for dropping torpedoes. And then there's a little research thing that's cracking on. So that story's gone nuts. So what did we see that, and what do we think about that thing?
Yeah, I saw you had 5 views on that story. That's a record, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We had one, yeah, and one of them was a dog. Yeah.
Spot.
I mean, it's great. So you've got a multi-rotor. It can drop a torpedo, take out the ship. I mean, me personally, I would just have, I think I've said this before, but I said this off air before. I would have 1,000 drones in a box, and I would just go, make that ship disappear. You know, they've all got like 20 or 30 grams C4 in it. That building, that ship.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's ruined this stream. There we are. Thank you very much.
And if they were Intel drones that could spell out a message as they flew across the skies, it'd be
that's right. We're coming to get you. Don't look this way. Look this way. Yes. No, I don't think you're wrong. I think the reality of that is that those photos that they put up, whether they was CG or whatever, were to get people to look. But so I think a little bit of resupply stuff and things like that is probably what's in order. And if anyone's looked, there's actually a job at the company that we advertised. Let me put that link up here.
But how easy is it to produce countermeasures against a drone like that? I mean, drones are so, we've been told, all you need is one of those little drone guns. You can shoot them out of the sky. So is it really sensible to put that weak point of failure in the thing?
Yeah,
just hurl the torpedo in the water. Just throw it over the side. It's got an engine motor in it. It'll go its own way. Worked in World War II.
I mean, I think it would be, you know, it's actually not a bad idea, especially if you've got the range, though. But can it carry this torpedo? How far can it actually carry it? Because if it can carry it a couple of kilometers, it's not further enough. You need this drone.
Yeah.
We need more fairly swordfishers.
Oh, come on. Pull up a sandbag and tell you a story about them.
Solar power. Solar power.
Yeah, green. You want green torpedoes. That's what we want.
It'll never work in Europe. We don't have enough sun.
With environmentally friendly explosives in the tip.
I grew up near Yeovilton, which is where the Royal Naval Historic Flight is based, and so the swordfish used to come. Sorry?
I'm sorry to hear that.
What, near the? Yeah, I know. I had to, unfortunately, but I wasn't in the Navy. So we had. He's passed away since, but in the village, a chap that used to fly the Sea Fury, Lieutenant Commander Shepherd, was in the village, and he got grounded for a while because he came through one of the cricket matches through the trees in the Sea Fury, and our opposing team hit the deck and then made a complaint to the Navy, which I thought was very, very, very unsporting, because everybody in the village just waved, of course, because that's what you did.
Was it a women's team? Were they all called Karen?
Yeah, definitely. They must have been. I think they were like from Ilminster or Chard or somewhere like that.
All inbred. I mean, sorry.
Maybe even Taunton. It could have even been Taunton.
Karens.
You can't have Taunton people there.
Speaking of Karens, have you found your Karen yet, Bruce?
I'm pretty sure I know who my Karen is. We will get proof sooner or later.
Oh, really? Are you quite close to discovering that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Oh dear.
But I believe it might be that friend that you got some time ago.
I've got so many friends, Louis. That doesn't narrow it down at all.
Look, we've definitely degenerated into nonsense. This has been a great chat this evening. Did anyone else see anything else before we go? Going once, Going
I
twice.
noticed that it's 1 a.m. That's the last thing I've noticed today. It's 1 a.m. I need to sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, that's also a consideration. Well, thanks very much. Thanks, Ash. Thanks, Jonathan. You haven't said much. You haven't piped up, Jonathan, which is amazing. Richard, thank you very much. I'll leave Ash and Richard to discuss this microdrone 4.
Yes.
It's bad news. You don't. It's foolish threatening people, I think, in social media these days, or making spurious claims, because grown-ups will see and will take action against it.
And it's also evidence for the court to consider when it
Exactly.
goes to court, bribery and blackmail. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just nonsense. Bruce, we look forward to seeing whether you're free or not next week. Goodness knows what hornet's nest you've kicked over there. Louis, enjoy traveling to Brazil. And Mark, who knows what adventures are coming your way. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Dear viewer, wherever you are in the world, stay safe. We look forward to seeing you again, 2100 GMT next week. Look after yourselves. Take care. 2 buttons to click now. There's the first one. There's the next.